Early voting in the Texas primary election starts in just over 2 weeks. One of the biggest races on the ballot is the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. The race will determine which Democrat takes on Republican Senator Ted Cruz in November. 9 candidates are on the ballot. Last Sunday, 3 of them met on the debate stage: Congressman Colin Allred, State Senator Roland Gutierrez, and State Representative Carl Sherman. It's likely the only time they will go head-to-head before Election Day. Our Ryan Chandler brings us a look at the big debate.
Well, every candidate on this stage agrees they want to unseat Senator Ted Cruz this November. But the debate drew contrasts between how they intend to do it and what they would represent in the U.S. Senate.
So on November 5th, let's get rid of them.
The race against Ted Cruz.
It's about broken systems and broken grids.
The top target for these 3 vying to become the first Texas Democrat in the U.S. Senate in 31 years.
We have to make sure that we actually beat Ted Cruz in this election. I've got a record of beating long-term incumbents who nobody thought could be beaten.
Frontrunner Colin Allred running on a record of flipping his House district blue and working with Republicans in Washington.
It's possible to work across the aisle. I'm the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation.
I'm a progressive and I do not apologize for it.
State Senator Roland Gutierrez hitting Allred from the left every chance he gets.
That's the way we win in November. Not by moving to the middle, but by inspiring every Democrat in this state.
And State Representative Carl Sherman preaching unity as a pastor.
I don't like politics, but I love people.
Political divides opening over one of the #1 issues of the campaign, the border.
We don't need to have Democrats throwing our president under the bus.
Gutierrez critical of Allred's vote to condemn President Biden's handling of the border.
We don't need to build walls. We need comprehensive immigration reform, Congressman.
I'll be honest with you. That was a tough vote for me. The status quo is unacceptable. And that instead we do need to have a comprehensive immigration reform.
It's a crowded race, with 9 names on the ballot and nearly half of Democratic voters telling us they're still undecided. A runoff may take this race into overtime. Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
We want to get more insight into the debate and the reaction to the candidates. We're talking to 2 journalists who moderated the debate. Joining us now in studio is Bob Garrett, newly retired as Austin Bureau Chief from the Dallas Morning News. Welcome, Bob, and congratulations on retirement.
Thank you, Josh.
We've also got joining us via Zoom, Jessica Montoya Coggins, the Executive Director of the Texas Signal Media Foundation. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, and I also reiterate my congrats to Bob.
Thanks, Jessica.
All right, well, Jessica, let's start with you. You heard the candidates discuss a wide variety of issues. What were the biggest points that caught your attention? What stood out?
Well, the first question that I asked was actually in relation to abortion rights. Right now, we are at a time in Texas where abortion is essentially banned. These 3 candidates are running very much on a platform of trying to restore abortion access. So I wanted to gauge how they would approach that. They were all pretty much in agreement that they would go to larger lengths to do that. But I was a little, they had some nuance there about abolishing the filibuster or potentially expanding the Supreme Court.
Well, Bob, what stood out as the biggest differences between the candidates that you saw? What stood out to you?
I think the border and the Gaza-Israel war, Josh. On the border, Roland Gutierrez is the underfunded, scrappy challenger to the frontrunner, Colin Allred, and he blasted him for voting for the January 7th Fox News resolution, being one of only 14 Democrats to vote for this resolution that was critical of Biden. Gutierrez said, "You don't throw Biden under the bus." On Hamas and Gaza, likewise, both Carl Sherman and Roland Gutierrez criticized Allred as being too pro-Israel, in effect, to giving Israel too much support and trying to draw attention to, I think, as Gutierrez said, you can't bring justice to 1,200 by killing 30,000, meaning 30,000 civilians. So there was a clear difference there. Of course, Allred, defending himself on both counts, said, we need a border fix. It's got to be bipartisan. That's what I'm about. On the Middle East, he said, we've got to get the hostages out, and you can't let Gaza continue to be a base for terrorist attacks.
Well, the AFL-CIO audience was engaged, clapping and cheering for their favorite candidates' responses. Jessica, how do you think the audience affected the course of the debate?
I think that the audience was very excited. This was the first and will likely be the only opportunity to sort of see these three main challengers for this race together. It's always hard to tell when you're a moderator, your sort of back is to the audience, but I could definitely tell that the audience was receptive to some of State Senator Gutierrez's attacks. And then they also, I think, were showing a lot of support for Allred. He had a pretty memorable line noting that, he had union support, Chamber of Commerce support, and he didn't necessarily see, that it was a bad thing that he could tout both of those.
Well, Bob, similar question. Do you think the audience had any effect on the way things went for the candidates?
I think picking up on that, all three candidates, of course, supported the most important labor issue is the PRO Act, protecting the right to organize. They all paid lip service to that. But you had Gutierrez hammering away, saying, you can't be for the Chamber of Commerce and be a union guy. And that was, I think, Gutierrez is emblematic of his whole approach to this race, which is to appeal to the progressive wing, hope that his, even though he doesn't have money and isn't that well known, the Hispanic surname on the ballot will be enough to get him in a runoff.
Well, this was probably the only debate before the primary. Did any of the candidates do a standout job to make their case to voters? Jessica, we'll start with you.
I think this was really an opportunity for these candidates to remind voters that there is actually an election coming up. We're coming in just about a month away from primary. Early voting starts February 20th. It almost feels like this whole election is a bit of an afterthought for some folks. So I think this was really a good time for these candidates to make their case. We've seen some polling that has shown Allred sort of going out into the lead, but there's still many undecided voters.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of undecided voters out there. Do you think this debate helped anyone make up their minds, Bob?
I do, and I do think that the presence of the third candidate, Carl Sherman, made a difference. He is a pastor. He's older than these two other guys. They were less vitriolic, partly because when you're around Carl Sherman, he's just such a good man and above sort of the political fray. So I think that was in a way helpful to Allred because it sort of reduced the tensions and made them all kind of soften their punches. But I obviously a lot of the union people there were impressed with Colin Allred because they endorsed him.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Jessica Montoya Coggins is the executive director of the Texas Signal Foundation, and Bob Garrett is the newly retired Austin bureau chief of the Dallas Morning News. Congrats again. Thank you to both of us for joining us.
This truly is an assault on democracy, and he clearly does not honor the will of the voters.
Ken Paxton is now targeting some Texas cities, why their policies on marijuana are leading to lawsuits.